All right, folks, welcome back. Steve Malzberg here. Tuesday edition of the Steve Malzberg. Take two. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. Steve Malzberg with you. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say the first time. So I'm proud to say that our next guest is the great and wonderful Andy McCarthy. Of course, you know him, you love him. He's a senior fellow at the National Review Institute, the author most recently of Spring Fever, The Illusion of Islamic Democracy, which is out in paperback. But his latest piece at National Review is really being talked about all over the place. And I know Rush read it today on his show. Politics is not a soap opera. Now, I have been saying for a long time, I said this earlier in the show, but I've been saying for a long time that, you know, I was one of those back in the 90s and during impeachment and Clinton and all this kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong. I do not believe he was a good president, and I believe he should have been impeached, and I believe he should have been convicted in the Senate, but that wasn't going to happen. But having said that, I was wrong about what I thought he wanted to do. You know, I was wrong to the extent that I thought he would go to keep power, to maintain power, the power hungriness of them all that kind of stuff. I do not believe that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama have much in common at all. And I think that we should be very much more concerned. Is that proper English? Doesn't matter. I don't speak proper English. We should be much more concerned with what's going on with Barack Obama and his presidency than, as it turns out, looking back, we were or should have been with the Clinton presidency. Because to me, Bill Clinton just cared about a zipper and how many women he could have and how many women he could get and hiding the fact about it and lying about it. And, you know, that was the big intrigue. And as described by Andy McCarthy, it was a soap opera. This is not. Joining us now is the aforementioned Andy McCarthy. Hello, sir.
Steve, how are you?
I'm fine. You're the man of the moment. This piece you wrote for National Review is just fantastic and right on target. And, you know, we just had Fred Barnes on before who talked about wrote a piece about Obama's stubbornness and how frightening that is. And I use the word frightening all the time. But really, I mean, you just document in this piece how, you know, the difference between Clinton and what it was like then, and the seriousness of how we should view the Obama presidency.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I never like to think of our times as frivolous, but, you know, the 90s were a very fortunate combination of circumstances for our country. I mean, I think Clinton got to live, as I said in the column, off the fat of the land, in the sense that he profited from the Reagan expansion of the economy, the prosperity we had at that time, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the fact that problems were like Al-Qaeda, even though we were starting to get the Islamic terrorism hitting our shores, Al-Qaeda was kind of still an emerging problem. Other things that exploded after the turn of the century were just really starting out as small kernels of problems. So we had a time where it was opportune for a president who had the kind of problems that Clinton did, with the kind of fawning press coverage that he had, to turn our politics into something of a soap opera, so that he would jump from scandal to scandal to scandal. And instead of the nuts and bolts of the particular scandal, the press turned the story into how deftly he handled it.
Yeah, absolutely right. And there is absolutely no comparison between what we went through then, as we look back on it, and what we're going through now. What we're going through now, everything that's happening here directly affects your life and my life and the future of our children.
One of those periods that's probably the opposite of the mid-90s. We're not in a period of prosperity anymore. Obamacare is a cataclysmic disaster of probably unknown proportions in our history. I don't mean to suggest that we've never had terrible problems or economic problems in our history, but I don't think we've ever had something like this that actually hit what will turn out to be probably closer to 200 million than 100 million people when all is said and done. And the background noise to this, and it's really not noise, it's a serious substantive problem, is Iran is a major challenge for us. and the type of challenge that has historically led to war. So we are in very, very, I think, perilous times, and we're not in a period of time where I think the press can comfortably, at least for the sake of the American people, turn the coverage into how Obama will manage to orchestrate things so that he gets from scandal to scandal, or how he'll be able to turn the page tomorrow. Today's problems really are the news. They are these threats to us are not something that can be orchestrated away or spun away. They're very real.
No, we're talking Andy McCarthy here on the Steve Malzberg Show. They are very real, and we could spend probably from now until midnight just talking about, if we wanted to list concern after concern, or call them scandal after scandal, whatever you want, because there were just so many, as there were with Clinton. The billing records of Hillary, and the Monica Lewinsky, and Paula Jones, and all this and all that. But let's talk about, I guess, they say, what will presidents be remembered for? What one statement? Ask not what your country could do for you. Did Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall? I am not a crook. Read my lips. No new taxes. And, of course, Bill Clinton, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky. Not once did I ask anybody to lie. Okay, that was a lie. And it didn't, like I said, affect your life or my life or our kids' lives. But when Barack Obama looks at us for 3 years, repeats over and over and over, if you like your insurance, you could keep it. If you like your doctor, you could keep it. To your point, the left is now coming forward and saying, well, LZ Granderson on CNN said, oh, all presidents lie. It's just, if it affects you personally. He did it for the greater good, they're saying. So they're legitimizing his lie. But this lie doesn't, compared to the other statements we just made, notwithstanding Reagan and the significance of that, this one is the one that this line that he'll be remembered for, and this lie that he told is affecting millions and millions of people right now, and will affect 100 million more next year.
I think that's right, Steve, and I think it also calls for a reassessment of everything we thought we knew about him up till this point. Now, a number of us have been making the argument since before he was president that he simply was not an honest guy, and that there was a tinge of fraud to here, there, and everywhere in his background. There was fraud in the way that he was conducting the government, but I don't think that it came home to roost, to borrow a term from Jeremiah Wright, until very recently. And I think when you have a moment like that, where the scales really fall from everyone's eyes and they get to see what it is that we're really dealing with, I think you have to go back and reassess everything you thought you knew up until now. Why should you be surprised, for example, that this is the same guy who looks you in the eye and tells you Benghazi was about an anti-Muslim video? And I think we could list a number of things like that throughout the administration. I also think the thing that this administration will be most remembered for, and what the president will be most remembered for, is really the way he has perverted our constitutional governance. It really is remarkable that with every passing disaster that Obamacare results in, what we get is that the president thinks that he can unilaterally tweak the law and just basically change what Congress has written, and I'll waive this, and I'll put in that, and I'll set up my own executive program, and I'll legislate here, and I'll ignore the courts there. If we had a Republican president, the press would be much more into doing its job, and I don't think we would have gotten to this point. But he really has eroded the boundaries between the branches that were really the firmament of American liberty and American constitutional governance. And it's going to take a long time to recover that, if we can.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. As you ask in your piece, and you kind of beat me to the punch, though never desirable, presidential fraud might be tolerable if this were, again, 1995. But it's not. Our times are grave. Unlike the days of the Clinton bender, the question is not how the president is going to survive another fine mess he's gotten himself into. The question is, how are we going to survive this president. And I had at the top of the show Congressman Doug Collins, who sits on the Judiciary Committee in the House, and they had hearings today on the president, the Constitution, and abuse of powers. And this is something you and I have talked about. I try to talk about with every appropriate guest, and in my monologues. I just don't understand. I know Congress could only impeach. They can't go to court and sue him. But I just don't understand how he's getting away with, not only on Obamacare, as you well know, Andy, but on, he did it with DOMA. He does it with ICE and deportations. He does it with the work provision of welfare reform. He picks and chooses what laws we'll enforce, which laws we won't enforce, and says it publicly. Healthcare he's changed a million times. I just don't understand how everybody's letting him do this.
Well, here's how he gets away with it, Steve. He's a power politician in the Alinsky mold. He certainly understands power. There may not be, I think in a lot of ways he's been overrated, but in terms of his understanding of power relations, he certainly gets that. And the fact is, the framers gave Congress very specific tools to rein in a runaway executive: impeachment and the power of the purse, and I guess to some extent the appointment powers too. We don't have a Congress that's willing, certainly, to go to impeachment, but they're not even willing to use the power of the purse to rein him in, so that, you have a situation where somebody like Ted Cruz says, the only way we're going to stop Obamacare is to defund it, and Congress, particularly in the House, has the power to defund things simply by not appropriating the money for it.
Right.
And what we, instead of Obama's lawlessness, what we get is an attack on Cruz for the suggestion that Congress use its constitutional authority to rein in this lawlessness. But if you don't use the tools the framers gave us, and Obama knows that those tools won't be used, you're guaranteeing that you're going to get a continuing stream of this stuff.
Absolutely. And we still have 3 more years left. And we saw the lawlessness in the Senate, where they blew it up and used the nuclear option and changed everything with the appointment of judges, and also the appointment of the members of the so-called death panel in the Obamacare legislation. They'll be appointed by him in his 51-vote margin, and it's almost too much to digest and to think about going forward. Is there any reason for optimism? I look at it this way: if they take the Senate, and if this continues, then they could impeach and convict. But I don't know if they'd have the guts to do that.
Well, I think here's the wild card, Steve. What's been most interesting the last 6 weeks is that President Obama's policies have always been unpopular, but he's personally surmounted by leaps and bounds the popularity. His personal popularity has been much different from his policy preferences. Now that's coming into line.
Yep.
And it's not the policies coming up, it's his personal ratings going down.
Yep.
I think the public can empower Congress to do things that Congress wouldn't otherwise do. So the wild card in this is, how unpopular does Obama get, and how much political opportunity does that create to capitalize on that? And do we have a political culture and a political opposition party that's willing to do that?
That is the question for the ages right now. Andy, always great to talk to you, my friend. If we don't talk between now and Christmas, have a great Christmas, Happy New Year, but I'm sure we will. Thank you, sir.
Steve,
take care. Andy McCarthy, Senior Fellow, National Review Institute, author of Spring Fever, Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV and Radio.